Hello and welcome back to Picks and Portraits. As we are now counting down the final days of this awful year, I thought it'd be fun to revisit a New Year's Eve of the past, 2003, with Adult Swim's New Year's Eve Bash. This was a special piece of programming ran during Cartoon Network's late night block, Adult Swim, that straddled 2002 and 2003, and I think it's a really great snapshot into that period, the period in programming I certainly most associate with Adult Swim. We've covered a lot of different periods and networks this year, and this finally gives us a chance to talk about Adult Swim. So for those unfamiliar, Adult Swim was launched in 2001, again, as Cartoon Network's late night block, originally running from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Sunday nights with a repeat Thursdays. Traditionally, their late night programming had been classic animation. These could be old black and white cartoons or stuff from the NFB up here in Canada. The rise of primetime adult-oriented animation and creator-driven cartoons more or less coincided throughout the 90s. You had things like The Simpsons, Beavis and Butthead, and Ren and Stimpy earlier in the decade, and then the What a Cartoon boom, Family Guy, Futurama, which virtually redefined what a cartoon could be. Compared to the previous decades, when animation was largely targeted towards children, an entire generation had now grown up with more unique and mature tunes. The driving force behind Adult Swim was producer Mike Lazo. He had worked his way up at Turner Networks, from the shipping department to programming TBS's afternoon animation block, and eventually Cartoon Network, where he became VP of programming in 1994. That year, Lazo would be responsible for producing arguably Cartoon Network's most influential show, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. He did so through the production company he founded with Keith Crawford and Andy Merrill, Ghost Planet Industries, which later became William Street, after the street their offices were located on in Atlanta. This series cast 60s superhero Space Ghost as a talk show host, with his enemies Zorak and Moltar as his bandleader and producer. Another villain, Brak, also made sporadic appearances, though he would have a much more prominent role on the show's spin-off series Cartoon Planet, which followed a more variety show format. It consisted of Space Ghost, Brak, and Zorak presenting cartoons from the Turner Library around original skits. There was plenty of singing and dancing. Cartoon Planet actually spawned a couple of albums. These skits and interstitials would have formed a lot of Cartoon Network's identity going forward, both aesthetically and in tone. There was quite a range of humor, sometimes absurd, other times more conventional, occasionally very grating, especially Brak. They also repurposed a lot of archival or public domain footage and some classic tokusatsu to very weird effect. I love this. It creates a really interesting, surreal kind of experience. The budget wasn't necessarily there, but working with what they had, the producers managed to make a pretty unique show. Brak would become Cartoon Planet's breakout star. He was so popular that in 1997 he was given the opportunity to host Cartoon Network's New Year's Eve festivities for the first time. Previously, Cartoon Network had celebrated with a Haji New Year in 1994. We talked about that in our recent Festotunes video. Check that out if you haven't. With Brak's extravagant New Year's Eve cartoon party show Spectacular, they rang in 1998 with a marathon of tunes featuring Scooby-Doo, Dexter's Lab, and Space Ghost before midnight, and Cartoon Planet after. It ran from 8 p.m. New Year's Eve to 6:15 a.m. New Year's Day. It did have some original content, mainly predictions. These were absurd and transcended time with lots of old-timey footage. I'll post a link in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. The year 2000 ushered in not only a new millennium, but also a new lineup of William Street cartoons, which more or less would comprise the original Adult Swim. These included Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Like Space Ghost, this recast a Hanna-Barbera superhero from the 60s, Birdman, into another profession, lawyer. C-Lab 2021, which is now very close to becoming retrofuturism. The show it parodied, C-Lab 2020, was a kind of futuristic Jacques Cousteau-like show about ocean exploration. 2021 would repurpose scenes from the original series for comedic effect, just like Space Ghost. The Brak Show, which transplanted Brak into a wholesome 60s or 70s style sitcom, very weird, very uncomfortable at times, and what was probably the most popular of all, Aqua Teen Hunger Force. This was centered around the lives of fast food roommates Frylock, Meatwad, and Master Shake, as well as occasionally their neighbor Carl. They originally appeared in some form on Space Ghost, though would eclipse that show to the point where they actually starred in their own theatrical film, 2007's Aqua Teen Hunger Force: movie film for theaters. These 4 shows would all air in December 2000, but wouldn't be formally organized into Adult Swim until September 2001, which was a pretty shitty month otherwise. The name Adult Swim leaned into a pool metaphor or theme, kids out of the pool, stop watching. They had a warning advising parents that these cartoons were not for children. A lot of the original promos featured older people swimming, with warnings of violence or mature themes overlaid. Clearly, the desire was there for animation skewing towards an older audience, and Adult Swim not only gave a platform for Cartoon Network's original mature content, but also acquired programming like home movies, which had been produced for UPN but dropped after just 5 episodes. I'm sure Adult Swim was also many Westerners' introduction to more violent and mature anime, the first being Cowboy Bebop. It was their day one. By 2002, the block had grown considerably, so much so it was split into 2 blocks, action and comedy, with one airing Saturday and the other Sunday. Action, Saturday, was dedicated to anime. Some shows that premiered that year were Gundam 0080 and 0083, as well as Tenchi Muyo and Yu Yu Hakusho. Comedy, which aired Sunday, was comprised of the originals already mentioned, as well as the Oblongs, Mission Hill, and the Ripping Friends. And that just about brings us to Adult Swim's New Year's Eve Bash. This aired December 31st, 2002, and was hosted by Brak and Carl, who were superimposed over footage of Times Square. People gathering to celebrate the New Year in Times Square is a tradition that dates back to 1907. The rolling over into the New Year is symbolized by a illuminated ball descending from a pole atop the address of 1 Times Square. This begins at 11:59 and reaches the bottom at midnight. Millions gather in the square every year. It's televised and treated like an important cultural event, which makes Adult Swim's take on it all the more relatable, personally. This looks and sounds horrible. I love watching it on TV, but the idea of being herded in with a million others, even pre-COVID, causes me so much anxiety. It seems like a nightmare. Here it's treated as such. There is no cheering when Brak tries to interact with the audience. We also hear people puking and see a couple burnt out sitting on the sidewalk. Interstitials featuring Brak and Carl would play between the programming, which I couldn't find any information on, but imagine it leaned into the comedy side of Adult Swim. In these, they look back on some of their favorite moments from 2002 and made resolutions. One of Brak's is to discover dogs can talk, and continued to riff on the attendees. We see what Carl did last year, stand in an empty street looking for sex workers. Instead of a ball, Miwad descended at a sink at midnight. Carl misses it, having gone to the bathroom. However, the biggest thing to come out of this night was the announcement that Futurama was coming to Adult Swim. Futurama has a relationship with New Year's Eve. The series obviously starts on New Year's Eve at the turn of the millennium. This announcement is notable because new episodes were still airing on Fox at this time to poor ratings. And because of its airing here and strong DVD sales, it would actually be brought back after Fox canceled it with new episodes on Comedy Central starting in 2008. Adult Swim would throw a different kind of bash the following year, with Brak's dad hosting a New Year's party. Many stars from Adult Swim shows appeared. I will post a link to that and everything else mentioned in the description. We have talked about Cartoon Network a lot over the past few months, so I think it's only fitting we wrapped up the year like this. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and please consider supporting us on Patreon. That's the only place to see Century of Schlock, our exploration of trash media from the 20th century. We are currently winding down our look at animated smut. A big thank you to everyone who has supported us this year, even if it was just with your interest. It's been awful, but we made it. We have been through a lot, but we are still here, and I think that's worth celebrating. So here is to a happy, safe, and above all, better 2021. Happy New Year, everybody.